and welcome to the Do It Yourself Cover Design blog series. Um, Today, we're going to look at how to composite a scene for your book cover from the ground up. In the previous post, part 5, I believe, I walked you through some simple techniques for developing a concept with a pencil sketch, gathering some assets that you believe would support that concept, and in general, preparing yourself for what we'll be doing today. What I'm going to do is walk you through the ground up design of a book cover based on the concept sketch that we looked at previously. I'm going to show you how to simply blend images together. This is not going to be complex Photoshop work. It's going to be pretty straightforward, simple use of tools, masks, gradient layers, and so forth to create a believable scene. I want to point out before we get started that this is not meant to be a novice Photoshop course or an introduction to using Adobe Photoshop. If you are a brand new user, I'll try to explain what I'm doing as we go, but you might find that a bit of it is just moving too quickly for you. If that's the case, I highly recommend spending a little time on YouTube or on lynda.com. Investigating some Photoshop tutorials and becoming familiar with the software. Once you've done that, come back here and feel free to jump in, and we're going to have a little fun building a small town murder scene. So I've already done a test run of this cover just to make sure the concept held up well enough to actually serve its purpose. So it fits the genre that we've talked about. It's a believable scene. The idea of blood dripping from the sky doesn't feel entirely, I don't know, awkward, I suppose, or stupid. I mean, sometimes these concepts look great on paper, and then you try to execute them, and they just kind of fall apart. That happens all the time. If it happens to you, don't be frustrated. It often takes me 3 to 4 concepts before I really hit my stride on a cover project anyway. It's just sort of par for the course. But in this case, you can see here on the screen, I've got a test run that I've attempted already, and I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. So this is the paperback edition of the Can't Go Home concept cover. You can see that I've already typeset it, and the scene is basically established here. What we're going to go through today is just a look at how to blend these images to create the scene. We won't be touching on typography or any kind of enhancement to the final image. That will come in subsequent do-it-yourself series posts. So you can see the image kind of holds up. You get this nice sort of ominous sky and this sort of threatening blood dripping, oozing, sort of clouding over this quaint small town. So this is what we're going to try to produce today. Like I said, I've already kind of done a simple run through. I'm going to try to do this again to show you just how easy it can be to create a scene that looks this believable for a book cover. So here on the desktop, I have a couple of things. I have a folder of stock images, and we'll take a quick look here. So we have this ominous feathery cloud image. We have this sort of ink, this red ink in water that sets a nice tone. We've got a few more individual drippings that are similar to that image in its style. Some more clouds. We've got the nice small town panorama. I believe this is Athens, Georgia. So if you happen to be in Athens, Georgia, you might recognize this scene. That'll be kind of fun, creating a book cover from your own small town. And then, of course, a little bit more blood. And that's it. We just have this handful of small images, and we're going to build the scene based on that. If I go back and show you what we created from it, it's kind of interesting how you can take just a handful of unrelated images and build a convincing environment in which your book cover can begin to sing. I won't pretend this is the most perfect or amazing book cover in the world, but our goal here is not to create the most perfect or amazing book cover. It's to get you started on the right foot for thinking about how to create your own and using some simple techniques that I've learned over the past few years to do so. So let's get started. We're going to open up our Photoshop file. In the previous post, actually the post before the previous post, we looked at how to set up a book cover template. I've sort of built one here based on the presumption that this is a 5x8 paperback novel with a 350-page count. So what we're looking at is, here on the right is the front cover, in the middle is your spine, on the left is your back cover, and this block that's sort of called out right here is where the CreateSpace barcode will automatically be placed. So each of these guidelines represents either a gutter or a margin or a fold line in the book cover design. If you go back and compare this to the template that we built, you'll understand that primarily you need to work within these large rectangles on either side. Your artwork can certainly bleed off of those rectangles, but if you get too close to these inner lines, this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here, and of course the innermost top and bottom lines. If you get too close to those with your text, you run the risk of text being cut off when they physically cut the paper for your book cover. You don't want to get into that boat. And in most cases, CreateSpace is pretty good at providing quality control, and they'll let you know if you're risking having some things cut off. Okay, so I'll try to explain everything I'm doing as we go. The first thing I always do when I come into a file like this is I press the F key on my keyboard. That gives me a full screen view of the file, and that allows me to, with the hand tool, sort of drag the cover around. That's very helpful for when I'm resizing images and I'm moving very quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is grab our Athens, Georgia panoramic photo. So I'm going to switch over to Finder, and I'm going to open the stock folder, and I'm going to grab this photo right here. Now you can certainly drag this directly into the Photoshop file and it will place it for you. I don't necessarily like to have Photoshop do that for me. I might be a little bit old school, but I like to do it myself. So I tend to grab it and drag it directly onto the Photoshop icon, which will open the file as a brand new image in a separate document. At that point, I'll hit Command A and Command C, which will copy the image. I'll close that file. Now, back in our cover file, you'll notice that I have a background layer selected here, and we're in the larger art folder. I will paste that Athens, Georgia photo into the art folder, and then I'll give it a nice simple name like City Panorama. Now you'll notice the image is extremely large. If I zoom out and I select the image with Command T, that will just give you the transform bounding boxes around the image. You can see just how large this image is. It runs incredibly far off the page, but that's a good thing for us for a widescreen cover, because we're going to attempt to do a full wrap on this cover, meaning that the image will start on the front cover, it'll run onto the spine, it'll run onto the back cover. We'll have a nice complete visual concept wrapping around the entire thing. There won't be any panels or any cut lines where you move from the front cover to the spine or anything like that. Now, if I were to resize this photo, you'll see just how much we have to work with. So how do you choose what part of the image you want to focus on? Do you want to go, if you were to scale it to the width of the cover, you can see by how far we're zoomed out here that, you get this nice clock tower on the spine, which is kind of a cool image. That would make a really interesting spine as it's standing out on the shelf. But if you look at the image on your front cover, that's a really boring, kind of uninteresting scene. There's not much going on there. Nothing grabs your eye. Nothing stands out. It's just an average street scene. So what I did in the dry run is I actually took the image and scaled it so that our clock tower is about centered on the front cover here. And I usually eyeball this. I've been doing this for many years, so I'm a fairly good eyeball judge. It looks like we might be a little bit wider on the left than the right, so we'll place that clock tower image right there in the center. Now, so I just hit Enter to accept the transform change. That was, again, Command T to select it. And then once you've scaled it, enter. As you're scaling, if you hold down the Shift key, as you see these arrows appear over the little grabbers at the corner of the image, hold down Shift and that will scale the image appropriately without losing its aspect ratio. If you were to do this without holding Shift, you can stretch that image in ways that are going to make it look, they'll distort it. It won't look believable. It'll look kind of messy. So I'll leave that image as is. Now, so far we've scaled the image. We have it centered on the front panel. That gives us a nice focal point for the front cover. So that clock tower sort of stands out and says, look at me, this is a small town that has invested in its own local architecture and art. It gives the community a sense of focus and purpose, which in the case of a threatening cover like we're designing now is actually going to hopefully very subtly suggest that this is a town that you certainly don't want to see bad things happen to, because they put so much into how beautiful they look and how community driven they are. Those might be a bit of a leap, but hopefully that's a nice subtle tone that you get from something like this. Okay, so now you might notice that we have this image that fills the width but does not fill the height of this book cover. That's okay, because we're going to be building a scene that doesn't depend on this image filling the entire cover. What I'd like to walk you through is how we turn the cover into a full sky scene. I'm going to begin by actually taking our image here, and you can see I've got the arrow tool selected here. That's V as in Victor on your keyboard. I'm going to drag that straight down until I'm happy with it. And when I say happy with it, what I mean is I really truly want to emphasize the vastness of the sky in this particular design, so that the town feels almost like it's cowering underneath the dripping blood and the terrible clouds. And you really get a sense of this town feeling claustrophobic and threatened by this impending doom. And one way to do that is to make the town image exist lower in the design, so you can emphasize that vast sky. So we're going to pull that down just a bit here. I think that's a pretty good place to start right there. If we wanted to compare this to the one I've created in the past, we can go back to our test run and look at it. And you can see at the bottom of the cover, we can just see the front arch of this building. And that's relatively close to where we're at right now. So I think we'll call it good right there. Now the next thing we want to do is start to fill in all of this space here for our sky. So what do we want to do? We want to actually fill the background with appropriate sky colors. So let me go a little bit larger. And on the toolbar here, you have an eyedropper. I'm going to use that to sample a common blue color. It's actually kind of a dusky purple from the sky. I'm going to go to my background layer, and I'm going to fill this layer with that color. Now you can do this using your paint tool, which is hidden behind this gradient tool in the menu, your paint bucket, and then just click like so. Or if you want to use your key commands, you can do that. You can hold down Option and Delete at the same time, and that will fill with the front color from your palette here. If you were to hold down Command and Delete, it would fill with the back color. So now you can already see we've started to build the basic tones of the sky. Now these clouds are kind of in the way, and we want to get rid of these because we're going to build our own cloudscape. What I don't want to do is attempt to actually physically cut the sky out of this image. For one, that's time consuming. For another, there's a good chance no one's going to notice that attention to detail. There are ways that we can fudge it that will work really, really well for this cover. And anyone who's listening to this who hears me use terms like let's fudge it, or let's use a shortcut, or let's cheat a little bit, these are exactly the kinds of things that I'm hoping to teach you today, so you don't feel intimidated by all of the different Photoshop techniques you have to learn to composite something in the most perfect way. We want it to be believable. We don't want you to have to spend 40 or 50 or 100 hours doing it. This is intended to be a pretty quick take on how you can do it yourself. So I'm going to show you a few different ways we can sort of cheat our way through this. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to start hiding some of these clouds. So this is where I'm going to show you how to simply mask and use gradients to hide portions of a photo. So let's select our city panorama here on the right. Right here at the lower part of our toolbar is a rectangle with a hole in it, and that represents our mask. Let's click that, and that's going to apply a full mask to this image. Now a mask, like you might imagine, is intended to hide or show parts of an image. Right now the mask is white, which means it's showing everything. If that mask were black, and let's select black here and hit Option Delete to fill it, then the mask actually hides everything in the image. So we're not after a binary solution like showing or hiding everything. What we want to do is show or hide small parts of the image. And this is where gradients come into play. So you'll notice here in the Paint Bucket tool, we actually have a submenu with Gradient tool on top. We're going to choose that Gradient tool. It's important that you choose the right gradient. So let me show you again. Right here in this toolbar across the top, you'll notice that it gives you a preview of the kind of gradient you're going to use. We're going to select that by clicking on it, and it shows you some of the default presets that Photoshop gives you. The first one is solid black to white. The second one is black to transparent. That's the one we want to use. So we're going to click OK on that. And you'll notice down here, black and white, but up here, black to transparent. These are the different types of gradients we can use. Right now we want to select the first one, which is a linear gradient. So whichever direction we drag our tool in, it's going to create a straight gradient line. The mode should be set to normal. The opacity is fine at 100%. So let's go ahead and apply a gradient, and I'll show you how this gets started. To do so, you want to make sure over here that you do not have the actual layer selected. If you do and you draw a gradient, then it's going to actually, let me undo that and choose a different color. It's going to draw a black gradient on the image itself, okay, which looks kind of cool, but it's not what we're trying to do. What we want to do is blend this image with that background color. So select the gradient mask, or select the mask, and we're going to apply the gradient to it. So you've selected your gradient tool. On your keyboard, G represents that tool. See, you can see the shortcut key listed here. All right, now the crosshairs here are where my tool lives. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and then I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag. You can see it's drawing a line. In the crosshair at the very top, that plus, it shows you where the gradient begins. Where I release it is where the gradient will end. So if I were to apply a gradient right here, release all that, you can see that it gives you a very subtle, soft wash here. That's because we're going from a solid color to a transparent color, but we started quite some distance away. So the gradient down here is quite transparent. Now if I were to turn off the mask, let's say disable that, you can see that it brings back the full richness of that image. So we're not actually losing the image that we're working with. Let's re-enable that. So again, click and hold down Shift to begin to draw that line, because we want just a straight gradient wash down. So I'm going to do that a few times until we start to see the edge of that image blend away. Okay, and you can start to see, if you select the photo image, you can see where the top border of it is, and you can see we've begun to wash away that border, so it gets invisible there. And that does a really good job of blending sort of that periwinkle sky color with our fading sunset sky here. It's a good start. These clouds, however, are going to be a little bit of a problem for us because we want to add our own cloud textures. We also want this sky to feel nice and empty as we lead up to those big clouds. So we're going to try to brush those clouds out, also in a very simple way. Now, I want to show you what happens if you attempt to do this with a gradient mask. So we want to wash out the entire left segment of clouds here. What we don't want to wash out is the town. Now, if I were to grab the gradient tool and stretch a line like so to begin to wash those out, you'll start to see that it dims part of the town because it's actually masking that entire photo. So if I do that again, more extremely, you can see it's blending out parts of the image we actually want to preserve, which is this cityscape all the way to the horizon line. So I'm going to undo those last two moves. What I'm going to do instead is grab the brush tool. That's B as in boy on your keyboard. And then I'm going to go select a very simple soft brush. It should be the very first brush icon in your palette. And I'm going to choose a nice large size. We're going to go with 1600. Notice that the hardness of the brush is set to 0 because we don't want any strong edges in what we're about to do. Now, again, make sure that your mask is selected. Make sure that your brush color is set to black. And then we're just going to begin up here. We're going to click and begin gently sort of brushing down to get rid of some of those clouds. And it looks like Photoshop is either lagging or just messing with me right now. It looks like it's messing with me right now. Nothing just happened. It looks like my computer has decided to slow down right here. So I'm not going to edit this out because this is a kind of problem that you might run into. So I'm going to wait for just a moment here. And we're going to see if that brush actually applies. There we go. You see how that applied? Now it applied very poorly because I wasn't able to see what it was doing in real time. So let's undo that. Let's see if we can try this again. We're going to go back to the brush tool. And we're going to start, there we go. And we're going to just start gently kind of brushing out parts of the clouds. Now, that brush is a bit big for me right now, so we're going to decrease the size, which you can do here in this palette, or on your keyboard, the left and right brackets, just to the right of the letter P, as in Paul, will control the brush size as well. We're going to take this down, let's just say to 1000 even, and we're going to keep brushing. That should give us a little bit more control over taking away some of those photos. Now, it's okay if some of those clouds live, because that gives us a nice sense of that horizon line. It doesn't have to be perfect, again. But we're going to try to take most of it out. You see there's kind of a bright spot right here around the clock tower I want to brush out. Now you notice as I'm brushing that there are parts of the clock tower that seem to have faded out. That's okay. We're going to solve that in just a minute. Now, this is what my mask looks like right now. If I zoom in on that, you can see it's just a messy horizon line of blurs. I'm going to zoom back out here. We can correct that by choosing our white gradient. So again, the gradient tool, which is the letter G, set your color in the foreground to white. Now, we can actually clean up parts of that by dragging the gradient in reverse down here. So very tight gradient lines will restore a lot of the lost richness of that color leading up to that. So again, hold down Shift and click and drag straight up. And the closer we get to the horizon line, the more it's going to risk touching the sky. So it's okay if that line is a little bit fuzzy. That gives us a sense of depth. Now our clock tower, on the other hand, we want to avoid that feeling washed out. That's the focal point of our image. I don't mind so much that there's a bit of a ghosted halo around it, because as we build our sky, there's a good chance that's going to fade back. If it doesn't fade back, we'll correct it later. So for now, let's focus on the clock tower. So we're going to zoom in a few times, switch to the hand tool, which is H, and we can click and drag our way over to the tower, which is right here. Now, the tower isn't actually erased. Remember that if we disable our layer mask, the tower is still there in all of its nice contrasty glory. So let's turn that layer mask back on. What we want to do is unmask this area over the tower. So we're going to take our brush tool, switch it to black. We're going to make that brush nice and tidy and small. Let's try 25 for now. We just want to brush out all of this. You notice how I got kind of flustered there. I was like, what just happened? Because we definitely don't want blue dripping down the front of this. Let's undo that. We don't want to use black here, clearly. White is actually what will erase the mask. Black creates the mask. So, forgive my stiltedness there. Choose a brush tool, set it to white, and we're going to brush on the top of this mask. You can already see right here in the center how the richness of that is coming back. So we're just going to brush. You could use the pen tool to do this. You could create a shape with your marquee and fill it. But I want to show you just how simply you can do this with a brush tool as you get closer and closer to the edge, so that you don't have to worry about doing complex shapes with a pen tool. Pens are nice for a lot of things. I try not to use them for things like this, mostly because I'm also a little bit lazy myself, and I don't like to set up 25 anchor points and try to get the curves just right. And also, pens take a lot of time to perfect, and like I said, we're trying to do this in a very simple way, so that anybody who sits down with Photoshop and understands the basics of the tools can do this. And unfortunately, the pen tool is it's actually a kind of complex tool that takes a lot of practice to get right. So this will serve our purpose for what we're doing today. Now you'll notice the brush I'm using is actually a little too big for me to run up here without risking our borders here. If I were to, for example, let's say I were to brush like so, you see I bring back part of the sky. So we don't want to do that. So let's undo that. Let's choose the brush tool. I'm hitting the left bracket to bring the size down. You can see it changing up here. I'm going to take this down to a 10. And that gives us a better tool for the size that we're working with. And I'm just going to continually click and drag and click and drag. It feels a little bit like you're brushing. I'm not going to get too close to these edges because we're going to zoom in and do those independently. Okay, and we're going to keep going up here. Get as much of this control taken out of the way. You notice when I'm doing this and I'm working, I don't process my words very well. I just said something about taking control away, and that makes no sense. So again, we're going to switch to our hand tool anytime we want to drag. We're going to get zoomed in really close here. And I'm going to switch back to the brush and make that tool a bit smaller. I'll go into a 5 now, which will give us a little more precision over those edges. Now again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Remember that no one's going to be looking this closely at your book cover. If they are, it's probably you, or it's probably another designer. Readers don't usually tend to expect things at this level of detail. That might be a huge generalization on my part. Okay, you'll notice I've got a little bit of the sky right there, so I'm going to switch to black. I'm going to brush that back in. What in the world? Pardon me for that. I'm going to undo that. We're going to undo that. We're going to brush the black in. Right. Okay, no, that's not right either. You can catch me getting a little flustered here. This is a nice reveal of what cover designers go through. I'm not entirely sure why. They just kind of screw with me here. So I'm going to select a little bit of that, fill it with black. Is it because, yes, it's because this is a gradient right here. So I'm going to undo this. We're going to step back. And I'm going to try not to expose that part of the sky again. Okay, this is the beauty of doing a live Photoshop demonstration, is you get these little hiccups in it. This is actually my very first one, so thanks for listening and putting up with my newbiness. I'll also point out I am not at all a video editor, so the reason I'm talking my way through these is primarily because I don't know how to edit them out. And I don't mind saying that. I don't mind admitting that. So, okay, you'll notice we're getting a pretty decent crisp edge here. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. part of the reason I'm not worried about perfection is that as we add some of our clouds and our effects to the sky, a lot of it's going to cancel out small details like we're looking at here. So I'm not too terribly concerned. Do that last one. See, I tend to just backstep when I make a little mistake. To do that, you can use Command Z, that'll handle your last step, or Command and Alt and Z will take you back multiple steps in a row. Now, for anyone who's using a PC, I apologize. I'm using Mac here and I speak in Mac language. For PC, the controls are a little bit different. You'd be looking at things like Control and Alt instead of Command and Option, but the pattern is usually the same. All right, now we've got to brush out this silly eagle here. So, again, small size. You'll notice the 5 is even a bit large for this. One thing I'll do is instead of clicking and dragging sometimes, I'll just do multiple clicks, and that'll help me to darken parts of the image without risking the edges too much. Part of that is because it's a soft brush, so it actually has a bit of a fuzz, a gradient at the edges of it, which allows us to do things like this without creating a soft, or a very hard border around the thing we're brushing out. So on this eagle, I'm going to most of the body out with this brush, and then we'll switch to a smaller one to get the rest of it. So we'll go down to a 2. That's a really small brush. So we're going to get our eagle shape here. We don't want to get too close to the edge. Now this part, I will confess, this part takes a little bit of practice because you want to get a feel for the border of that image without getting too close to the sky. And unfortunately, you're probably going to make mistakes here the first few times, if not the first dozen times that you attempt it. Be patient. A lot of Photoshop is trial and error. You can see I caught a little bit of the sky there, but I'm not going to sweat it too much. Trial and error. It takes years to get good at Photoshop, so do not beat yourself up if it takes you a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with it while you're doing this book cover. Again, my intent is not to make you a Photoshop pro. My intent is to help you create your own book cover in such a way that people cannot tell at first glance that you've created an amateur cover. Okay, now I'm pretty satisfied with this. You can see there's still little bits of the sky, there's still a bit of a halo here. We can come back and clean those up later if it becomes a problem, but I think that what we do is go into the disguise most of that work. So, let's pause for a moment here. I'm going to save our progress. I'm going to stop the video, and we'll do a series of small takes like this as we go through the remaining steps. So, thanks for listening. I hope it's been useful, and you should find the next video right here in the post, so you can keep going.